Listen. Don't look at the clock. Don't look at the camera. Don't look at each other with that practiced sympathy. Just listen, because you asked me to tell you how it happened, and I promised I would tell it straight. I could tell it straight. I could be straighter than your body cams, straighter than the red LED that burns through the frosted glass and tells me you're listening. You think I don't notice? You think I don't hear? I hear everything. I always have. That's the problem and the proof. If I close my eyes, I can hear the elevator cable whisper as it unspools, the refrigerator gasket sighing when it decides to forgive the door for being opened, the neighbor's toothbrush vibrating through plaster, the charger bricks humming in different keys, C for the cheap ones, A for the ones that came in pretty boxes. I can hear your hearts too. Don't flinch, sober, steady clock-like. Good men have such clean rhythms. Mine runs honest and fast, and that is not madness. That is fidelity to stimulus. I'm not mad. My name is Evan Hale. I was the night aide in apartment 24G, contracted through a respectable app that takes 20% and calls it Trust Services. The client was a retired venture investor named Arthur Vale, 81, widowed, rich, careful. I wasn't a live-in. I took the river of late shifts that other aides refused because the building's security protocol was fussy. Facial scan on the lobby turnstile, fingerprint at the service elevator, spoken passphrase at the front door like a stubborn spell. Rectify and resume, he liked to say to the locks. He recorded all the locks himself. He recorded everything. He had a pacemaker like a quiet metronome inside him. He had a home like a nervous system outside him. Hallway cams with black glass domes, a sleep mat that read breathing through memory foam, a kettle that texted the thermostat like they were friends. He had a smart contact lens, his right eye. Well, not an eye, of course, not a living one. The cornea was milk with a tiny camera seed set at the pupil, an iris that never dilated, a sky-colored ring when it woke to record. He was part of some trial he had funded 20 years ago. He said it made him feel modern. He said it made him feel safe. That I looked through people like paperwork. It looked through me. Don't tilt your head like that. It's not what you think. I'm not squeamish. Squeamish and sensitive are different breeds. The eye was not ugly. It was beautiful, if you like the beauty of things that cannot be swayed. It just watched. Not the way his left eye watched, with its warm impatience and unsteady blood vessels, but like a lens built into a doorbell, like an app checking a box, like the midnight streetlight that never blinks even when the power surges. I tell you, the right I did not open and close. It reported. Even when he slept, it glowed faintly. A pale ring, a coin underwater. The first night I saw it, he had nodded off in the recliner with the news playing low. The news no one really hears until somebody says breaking. His glasses slid down to the nape of his neck where his hair used to be. The ring glowed. I stood there with my little clipboard app, and I felt the ring weigh me like produce, like I was being measured for ripeness or for theft. The cabinet behind me contained the medications I dispensed, yes, and the key for the liquor drawer I did not open. You can check the audit trail. You already have. I know you have. The ring watched my inventory of the cabinet, and then the ring watched the television, and then the ring watched me again, as if I had become news. Mr. Vale, I said, Arthur. He woke like a man who wakes carefully every day so as not to knock over the life he has stacked. He smiled with the left, I in that good old way, and the right, I did whatever it does. Woke, recorded, calibrated. You're meticulous, he said. I can tell from the way you stand. People looked at me, back then, the way you're looking at the table now, with patience, with assumption. I returned the gaze properly. It's a good trick to have, but the eye taught me a stronger discipline. It taught me to be silent until the room confessed first. I discovered that the apartment had sounds within sounds. There was the HVAC's breath, and the sub-breath of the damper, and beneath that, oh, this was my favorite for a week, the mutter of the pacer at night, if you stood in the doorway to his bedroom and made yourself as thin as a shadow. You could hear it through the mattress. Thunk click, not quite a sound, more an intention of a sound. My own pulse would answer, quicker, eager, like a child told to keep up. I didn't tell anyone about the pacer. That was between me and the electricity that kept him. You see what I mean? Not madness. Attentiveness. He was kind to me. Do not cut that out of the record. He asked about the novel whose spine had cracked in my backpack. He warmed milk like my grandmother would have, scattering the cinnamon with a doctor's stinginess. He told stories about warehouse floors that became apps and apartments. He told me that staying up late was good for the soul because the dark gives the truth fewer exits. He had the impatience of a lifelong manager, yes, but he was kind. I never once considered harming him for his money or his things. Not first. Not ever in the way that you think. It began the way rot begins, with a root you only feel after the wall softens. The app told us, the aides, that the cams were for safety and training, and that only the family had direct access. The family was one daughter in Seattle who sent hearts in the chat, and one son in Florida who sent lawyers. The cams had a privacy mode that dimmed the lens light if a caregiver said privacy on. It worked on the hallway. It worked in the kitchen. It did not work on the right eye. Of course it did not. That had its own will and Wi-Fi. Sometimes when Arthur drifted, that I would stay bright. It would swivel not like an eyeball, but like a gimbal, tiny, smooth, precise, until the ring pointed straight at me. I asked once, does it always stay on? He grinned around his mug. That's the point. How else would I be interesting enough to test? I laughed the way you laugh at a joke you can't bear to leave unanswered, but my body did not laugh. My body learned to squeeze doorframes and walk sideways through rooms. I started bringing a strip of painter's tape in my pocket, the good kind that doesn't leave residue on glass. I told myself it was for the hallway dome, the one that faced the bathroom door by accident. I did not tape the hallway dome. I taped the light on the kettle when it made the counter look like an operating room. I taped the blue power light on the router because it pulsed exactly like a vein. I did not tape the right eye. I dreamt of it. In the dream, it was just a ring light hovering, hiss white, and when I reached up to touch it, my finger went through and kept going, and I woke with my hand clenched in the blanket and the taste of copper in my mouth. It was not a vulture's eye, no matter what the papers will say when they round me into a column. Vultures don't watch with attention. They watch with hunger. This I watched with the patience of recording, which is worse. Recording is hunger without eating. Recording is hunger that never ends. He went to bed early. He rose early. Between those hours was mine to patrol. I walked the apartment the way the app instructed. Check locks, check stove, check windows. Though the windows were sealed, 24 floors up, sealed when the building turned itself into safety. I looked at the socket where the Paranoia of Wealth plugs in, and I unplugged the charger that wasn't charging anything because I could hear it hum, and I hate waste. In the glow of the living room, I could see him, little chest rising and falling, left eye closed, right eye a faint planetary ring. Do you understand? I had done nothing wrong. I did what good men do. I kept the night. But the sound of his heart. Oh, I told myself it was love. Love of signal, love of proof. It called to me, thunk, click, thunk, click. Some nights it sped and slowed with his dreams, and I learned their shape by tempo. Some nights it went steady as a prayer, and I learned to count with it until the count outpaced me. I grew tender toward the idea that all the world was instruments timed to one pacemaker. I grew angry when the kettle boiled too hard and seemed to drown it out. I stood in the doorway, listening with the intensity of the lonely. That is not madness. That is devotion. I confess the first wrong thing I did. I put my phone on his dresser to borrow the pacer's rhythm through the recording app. I wanted to carry it away and listen to it on the subway home like a traveling benediction. As I reached, his right eye brightened by its own choice and watched my hand in such perfect concentration that my skin felt ashamed. I withdrew. After that, the eye and I were at war. He didn't know. Why would he? People do not know what their machines do in their name. I asked the app to reassign me to a different client. They said I was too reliable to move. Praise is just a sugar-coated command. I began to arrange the nights with a quiet plan. First, learn the blind spots. Every system has them where the specs met the budget and the budget one. The hallway dome had a blind spot right under its lip. The bedroom cam had been angled by a courteous installer to avoid showing the bed. which meant it fell in love with a plant in the corner instead. The lock on the front door had a battery tray that made a little mouth if you jiggled it, and the little mouth, like any little mouth, told the truth about when it was hungry. I fed the lock new batteries, and the lock was pleased with me and slowed its logs. Don't roll your eyes. Machines have moods, you just don't hear them. Second, learn the routines of men with the power to never have routines. He liked his milk at 10 o'clock. He FaceTimed his daughter at 10:10. He watched jazz videos from an algorithm that thought he was younger than he was. He brushed his teeth for exactly the length of the chorus of My Funny Valentine, the Chet Baker version, not the one with the trumpet that drove him crazy. He turned the hall light off last, because that's the light you must turn off last if your life has been longer than the bulbs it has burned. Third, choose a night when no one would call. The daughter had a retreat. The son had a golf tournament. The building's doorman had his wife in labor across town and would be less attentive than the turnstile. There was rain in the forecast. Not enough to be dramatic, just enough to make a city sound like it's breathing through a scarf. Rain erases the edges of things. Rain makes tears unremarkable. I drank water with a slice of lemon to apologize to my body in advance. I made tea quietly because if the electric kettle loved him, and it did, it loved me for loving him, and I did not want it to feel betrayed. You think I'm playing with language to keep you away from the act. I'm not. Language is the only thing that tells the truth about the act. It was 2:40 when I went to the front door and pulled the batteries I had put in. It fell gratefully into silence. The hall camera saw only the crown of my head as I stood on a chair and slid the lens hood askew. Just a kiss. The installer would think, later, that he had not tightened it. In the kitchen, I unplugged the router. No, I did not tape over anything. Not yet. And the apartment noticed nothing because I was careful to make the unplugging feel like an outage. I am good at outages. I have lived most of my life inside one. He slept. He had taken the little white pill that deepens sleep without making it sticky. His left eyelid fluttered. The right ring was pale, but awake. It watched the ceiling, which is where eyes look when people are trying to find better dreams. I stood in the doorway again and listened to the pacer. Thunk click, thunk click. The rain kept the windows company. The elevator whispered. I had borrowed a trick from another aide, the weighted blanket. It calms, it reassures. It is a hug you can fold and put away. I am telling you all this because it is important to know that I did not bring rope or knives or duct tape or the props of myths. I brought the ordinary instruments of care. He sighed in his sleep when I placed the blanket. Careful. You must understand how careful. The blanket spread like a cloud, remembered it used to be stone. He shifted, and I shifted too. And if we had been dancing in another life, this is where we would have laughed. The right ring brightened a notch, not a warning, a note. It observed the blanket as it had observed the kettle. I eased the blanket higher. His chest rose. The pacer said, thunk, click a little faster now. I put a hand on the blanket, and the weight doubled, as it does when hands decide to help gravity. He opened his left eye wide, and the right eye widened too, but only because that is what rings of light do when current surges. Arthur, I whispered absurd, tender, it's okay. He made the sound old men make when their fathers come to fetch them. I pressed. I did not press hard. I pressed the way you press a pillow over a breathe few can's face. You think you have seen that in films. You have not lived how it feels in fingers. It is gentler than you suspect, and cruelty because of that gentleness. He thrashed, but the blanket turns thrashing into remembering how to sleep. The left eye saw me and forgave me. I swear it did. And the right eye burned blue, brighter like a doorbell someone wouldn't stop pushing. Thump. Do not tell me it was only the pacer. Thump. The house joined in. The kettle's memory of boiling became percussion. Thump. The hallway's long wire was a string and a bass. Thump. A drop of rain made itself heavy and marched down the window like a foot soldier. Thump. His chest slowed. Thump. I held. Thump. He lessened. Thump. Silence. No, not silence. The kind of quiet that occurs when the drums do not stop, but you are no longer allowed to count them because the conductor has left the building. I peeled the blanket back. The left, I was fixed and glazed with sleep's last opinion. The right ring flickered and dimmed and then went out. I will be honest. I touched it the way a boy touches an ember to see if it's brave enough to burn him. It was slick and cool, nothing like fire. I had thought the killing would be the leap. I was wrong. The leap is after, when the world waits to see if you have the legs to reach the other side. I had planned, coldly, kindly, practically. You can play me the body cam from my bag. I feel it buzzing even now. You'll seize it when you're ready. I'm not hiding it, and you'll see that I did not stumble. I had a set of panel lifters for the raised floor in the study where he kept his server rack. The building had been built for quiet and cooling and cables. The rack whirred like a thoughtful animal. I used the lifters. I wrote the layout on a sticky note on my own hand because you must not trust your memory when it wants to be dramatic. I told myself what I always tell myself, not artwork. It was work. The blanket again. Zeheft again. The dignities arranged after indignity. I folded him smaller than he had ever been, and I hate that sentence, and I will not revise it. The cavity under the floor welcomed him with the way cold things welcome warmth, without judgment. I placed the panels back in order. I cleaned with surface wipes the way a man cleans after his toddler spills soup. That's where the internet teaches men to begin. I washed my hands with the lavender soap he used because he did not like the way the antibacterial one dried his knuckles. My hands smelled like an apology, which is all an apology is anyway. The ring did not glow. The pacer had joined the choir whose sound I had pretended to hear but could not now. I made the bed, as one does when one is on shift, and everything is normal. It was 3:32. The rain gentled. I sat in the kitchen and looked at his kettle and felt something new. Not guilt. Not relief. A quieter thing, a thing with a cool face. Peace. The eye was gone. The eye was gone. The apartment, at last, had only one listener. At 4:07, the wellness system called his daughter's phone with a yellow alert. No movement detected for 60 minutes. She pressed snooze. At 4:31, the wellness system called me with a yellow alert. Air quality sensor offline. It does that sometimes when you unplug the router. I plug it back in. Pro forma. At 7:03, the doorman buzzed to say a delivery was downstairs, a parcel that could wait. At 8:12, two officers knocked because a neighbor had reported a leak in the hallway by the door. Small, clear, subtle. No, not the horror you are imagining. Not blood. Condensation from the HVAC's overflow tray dislodged when I stood on the chair. The building is faithful when it wants to be. You are not the same officers, but you know them. They have the same posture, eager not to be dramatic, curious not to be callous. They smiled in that way, the way you smile when you step into an apartment that could be an old man's last room or an old man's favorite. "Morning, sir," the tall one said to me. "Small leak. We'll just take a quick look." I had cleaned well. I had made coffee. I was very good. Listen, I was better than any man you've brought into this room. I promise you that. I offered the mugs because that is what you do. Hospitality defeats suspicion, and I was not suspicious to begin with. Why would anyone be? I wore my badge lanyard like a church ribbon. My hands did not shake. We stood at the counter, three men with mugs. They asked where Mr. Vale was sleeping. I made a mouth like a mouth that had started to answer and then stopped because I remembered a privacy policy. "He's resting," I said. "Rough night. Weather." They nodded like men who have also used weather as an excuse. "No problem," the shorter one said. "We'll be out of your hair in 2 minutes." They didn't need 2 minutes. They needed 20 seconds to see that the leak was nothing. They needed 10 seconds to tap the camera dome and quip about being watched. They needed 5 seconds to pretend to wipe their shoes while they looked at the books and the photographs. Because officers are men, and men look at other men's lives without meaning to. I kept my breathing steady. I thanked every battery I had installed and every battery I had removed. I was calm and I was right and I was free. And then I heard it. Soft, patient, below hearing. The kind of sound that begins at the far stages of attention. You don't notice it. You notice the way your noticing changes. The pacer. I know you'll tell me pacers don't do that when their host is left behind. I will show you the research about electromagnetic fields and the way server racks can sing when their power conditioners batch their little currents. I will give you the physics. Oh, I can give you any physics you like, but I'm telling you what I heard. Thump. I put my mug down. The tall officer glanced at me. You good? He said. Yeah, I said. All good. Thump. The sound was under the floor. Of course it was. Where else would a heart be once it had decided to live in a building? The server rack hummed along like a choir in a cathedral. Thump. It aligned itself with the hum. Thump. As if the hum were a sheet of music, and the thump found its line. Thump. I laughed. It was a small laugh, and I turned it into a cough, and then I turned the cough into a sip. Sorry, I said, because I am polite in all the wrong moments. Thump. The tall one set his mug down now. He is you in this story. Accept the compliment. He set his mug down, and he did what you would do in a man's kitchen when a noise lives inside the walls. He said, "Ha, building music." He grinned. He was kind enough to pretend it was an ordinary thing. The shorter one nodded along. Radiators, he said, though it was August. Men argue politely with the physical world and call a help. Thump. Louder. My skin heard it louder before my ears did. The hair on my wrist learned to snap to attention. The lavender on my fingers turned into a hospital hallway from every childhood. Thump. I slid my foot against the tile, searching for a seam, and the tile told me. Not here. The study. The panels. The choir. Do you hear that? I asked, with the laugh a man uses when he's pretending there's a mouse in the cupboard, so he won't have to name a ghost. Pipes, the shorter one said. He sipped. He let the coffee burn his lip rather than say something else. I cannot sit still. I'm good at sitting. I'm excellent at being ordinary. But the thump found a rhythm that was not health, not HVAC, not neighbor subwoofer. You know what I mean? The rhythm that lives under every argument that pretends to be about money. The rhythm that tells two lovers to stop being brave and say the thing. The rhythm that says tell. I wandered to the study. They followed. Of course they did. Men follow wandering men in apartments because wandering in an apartment often means you're going to the place where something is wrong. I pointed at the server rack. I think the cooling tanks need a flush. I said, reasonable, sensible, professional. The tall one leaned in and listened. He cocked his head like a metronome that had forgotten how. Just fan noise, he said. His heart was steady in his throat. I envied him. Thump. It came up through my sneakers. It was in my knees. It was under my teeth. Thump. I laughed. No, I barked, and the laugh curled like paper near a candle. I set my hand on the floor. Warm. It would be warm. It hid machines. I pressed, the way I had pressed the blanket. The panels gave a millimeter because panels, like men, like to act harder than they are. Thump. I'll get maintenance, I said, and I went for the tools I had used to commend the floor to secrecy. The panel lifters, the suction cups, the soft pry. I moved like a man doing a job he had been asked to do, but had actually assigned himself. The officers watched me like friends. The short one put his mug on the desk, and the polite coffee ring made its mark like a wedding band. Thump. The cups kissed the tile. The tile kissed back. I pulled. The panel rose a finger's width, and the building breathed relief, or laughter, or hunger. The things sound like one another in a city. The tall one crouched, good man that he is, careful citizen that he is, and put his hand on the panel to help me not scratch the wood. He felt it. I watched him feel it. His eyes did not change because he is trained not to scare the frightened. But his breath met the thump in midair and nodded like an old acquaintance. He said, hey. Okay. He meant it the way men mean hey. Okay when somebody is sobbing or the tire blows and you're at 60 on the Williamsburg Bridge. He meant, stay with me. I did not. I was with the thump. It had become the only declarative sentence in the room. Upstairs a neighbor coughed. In the hall a child said mommy. The server rack hummed with the selfishness of work. The thump spoke my name the way only one person in my life ever had, and that person is gone. I ripped the panel up. The cups popped. The tall one reached to steady the edge, and the short one reached for his radio, without meaning to. The cavity breathed. Air from underfoot has a smell that belongs to basements and to wardrobes where childhood hides. I gagged and was grateful and was furious because the thump was now the whole of music. It was the percussion of admission. It was the stalled elevator car banging in the shaft to say, I am here, I am here, I am here. Do you want me to lie to you? Do you want me to say that I kept my dignity, that I looked at you with a man's distance and a man's humor, and handed you a confession package like a takeout bag? I did not. I tore the panels back with the hunger of a man who has learned to prefer truth to skin. I clawed the carpet and the felt and the cooling tubes and the wire raceways, and then my hands found the blanket because of course it had to be the blanket, the gentle instrument, the good weight, the lie people call comfort, and I pulled it up and the right eye's ring. Oh, it glowed, faint and dead, but it glowed, and in that tiny last light, I saw myself as the cameras have always seen me, small, patient, meticulous, and I screamed. I confessed, not again, not again, not again. That is what I said. Not I did it. That came later, easy, as if English had always held a place at the table for it. I said not again as if I were speaking to the old man, as if he had asked me to tuck him in once more, and I, a child at a house where men are careful until they are cruel, had said I will, and then had pressed too long and too well. I will not repent the words that came out of my mouth after that. They didn't belong to thought. They belonged to the thump. They belonged to the apartment. They belonged to the eye. You know the rest. You came. Maybe you were the ones who came an hour later when the others called and said, we need you, the way men call a priest when a different priest has lost his language. You turned your body cams on, click, and your hearts did not change their pace because your training is cathedral and your ribs are pews. You said my name gently, though I had not offered it gently. You did not put a hand on my shoulder because you are modern and careful, and hands are the first violence. You asked the question in the voice that writes the report without lying, and I gave the answer that would match your voice. I did it. I did it. I did it. And the thump, listen to me, listen, stopped. I have learned something in this room with you. It is not what the pamphlets want me to have learned. It is something softer and harder at once. The eye recorded, but the eye did not remember. Recording and remembering are different organs. It was my remembering, my hot, inflicted kind, that made the sound unbearable. That is why I am not sorry the eye watched me. That is why I am sorry the eye existed at all. I would have done it without the eye's help, perhaps later, perhaps sooner, because the thump was mine long before I borrowed the old man's. He only taught me its name. Do not say you pity me. Do not say I am sick. I am meticulous. I am faithful to stimulus. I am not mad. The world is loud, and I kept it quiet, and then the quiet grew a pulse, and it asked me who I was, and I answered the only way I knew how to answer when I was 8, and when I was 20, and when I was 30 and tired. I pressed. I mistook a blanket for mercy. I mistook a floor for a grave. I mistook a ring of light for an eye, and an eye for a god, and a god for an excuse. You will take me to a place where the doors have voices. I will learn their language. I will learn to breathe without counting. I will ask for a cell that faces the HVAC, so I can be certain the machine is the machine and not the drum of a man I try to love. Before we go, let me do one decent thing. There is a handwritten recipe card stuck to the magnet strip on the side of his fridge. Cinnamon milk. He thought it was funny to write it down. He did not think anyone would ever need to read it. Bring it to his daughter when you bring her the rest of the boxes later. Tell her to make it once. Tell her to drink it in the kitchen at night with the lights off so the city glows in the toaster. Tell her to listen and decide for herself which sounds are the ones that matter and which are the ones that are just the building being alive. Now, do you hear it? Of course you don't. Only I did. Only I will.